This is your USMNT Abroad weekend update from January 5th to January 7th of 2024. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV, and welcome to the first US Men's National Team Abroad episode of 2024, a channel favorite where every single Monday we update you on how the Yanks did abroad over the weekend. And unfortunately, Miles Robinson decided to not become an American abroad as I predicted. Unfortunately, because I actually thought he had potential to succeed in one of the top leagues as a mid-table team or even a relegation team. I thought he could have challenged himself, but instead he signed with FC Cincinnati for one season. Could he still go abroad? Maybe. Will he? Probably not. But understand, I will always root for any American soccer player, but I will root more for an American soccer player that goes out of his comfort zone to maximize his potential, like the many ones we talk about in this video. I understand players going for the money, it's their right, and honestly, I would probably do the same. But I'll always have the right to look at them differently based on their career decisions. With that said, drop a like in this video if you want to, and if you don't, I can't do anything about it. And this episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, but more on that later. So let's play the intro and let's start with the updates. As always, we start with the top 5 leagues in Europe, but a lot of them didn't have games over the weekend, and some of them, like for example the Premier League, they actually had FA Cup matches. But with that said, let's start with the Americans that normally play in the English Premier League. The first one being Matt Turner from Nottingham Forest. And on Sunday, Matt Turner was back on the bench for Nottingham Forest, but it was an FA Cup match, so we don't know if it was a rotation or he actually got benched. What we do know is that apparently Nottingham Forest is seeking a new goalkeeper in this transfer window. Will they get another one? Who knows? We'll see what happens. We'll keep you all posted. And then when the Premier League matches are back, we'll see if Matt Turner actually got benched. Next up, we have Chris Richards from Crystal Palace. On Thursday, Chris Richards started and played the full 90 minutes for Crystal Palace during their 0-0 draw with Everton in the FA Cup. With this 0-0 draw, they'll have to play one more match to see who advances between Crystal Palace and Everton. As for Chris Richards, he did fine once again. He's actually looking even more comfortable in the midfield, even though, as I previously stated, he's a center back and it shall remain this way. Berhalter also said in a press conference this week that he believes Chris Richards is still a center back, but he's happy that he can see that Richards can play in the midfield at a high level, which I fully agree with Berhalter. And I know it's actually kind of painful to agree with Berhalter, but when you're right, you're right. And he's right. Next on the list, we have Austin Trusty from Sheffield United. On Saturday, Trusty was rested by Sheffield United during their FA Cup match. I mean, they were facing a 4th division side and they still won 4-0, so it made sense to rest plenty of their starters. Last but not least in England, because Tyler Adams is still injured. Luca Koleosho from Burnley is also injured. So we still have the boys from Fulham, and they are A-Rob and Tim Ream. On Friday, A-Rob started off the bench and was subbed in the 82nd minute for Fulham during their 1-0 win over Rotherham United in the FA Cup. Just like Sheffield, Fulham was rotating and resting players. They just happened to face a tougher opponent that actually plays in the 2nd division instead of the 4th division. A-Rob was sent in late in the game to help them hold the 1-0 lead. As for Tim Ream, he was still not available as he is recovering from a minor injury, but he is expected to be back soon in the month of January. Now let's leave England and go to Italy and talk about the Americans that play in the Italian 1st division, the Serie A. The first one being Christian Pulisic. Actually, the first two being Christian Pulisic and Yunus Musa from Milan. On Sunday, Pulisic started and played the full 90 minutes for Milan during their 3-0 win over Empoli in the Serie A. Yunus Musa was back from injury and he started off the bench and was subbed in the 69th minute. Also, this match was at 6:30 a.m. on a Sunday and I woke up for it, and I knew I needed a good performance from Christian Pulisic to keep me awake. I just simply knew that coffee wouldn't be enough to keep me awake. Neither would Coke. So just so you know, I didn't do Coke. I just drank coffee. And then Pulisic played well, and that kept me awake. So how did Pulisic do? Let's just say he kept me awake. He was really good throughout the entire match, sharp on the ball, good in tight spaces, press resistance. He almost scored off a header. He was just very good. It seemed like all he needed to close the performance was a goal or an assist, and late in the game, he got his assist, and it was a good one. Pulisic carried the ball from box to box in transition and held it just long enough to make it as easy as possible for Traoré to score. Unselfish play and wonderful decision making. Also, one aspect to point out during that play is just how fast Christian Pulisic is while dribbling. It's much tougher to run the ball, and defenders didn't have the ball, and they still were not able to catch up to Pulisic in transition. Fantastic performance from the American. Now, Yunus Musa was not as good as Christian Pulisic in this match, coming off the bench, by the way, but one, he was coming off an injury, and two, he wasn't as good as Pulisic, but he was still really good. Musa came in and was aggressive on the ball, looked sharp, smooth. He had a good performance, just not as good as Christian Pulisic. And when you take into consideration that Musa was coming back from a 2-week absence, that he was injured, I would say it was a very encouraging return. I guess the only criticism I would have for Pulisic specifically is that he probably should have left Chelsea 6 to 12 months earlier than he actually did. He's been among one of the best signings in the Serie A, the first division of Italy. He's probably the second best, only behind Marcus Thuram from Inter Milan. But wait, there's more. We're not done with Italy yet. Now we have the Americans that play for Juventus, and they are Tim Weah and Weston McKennie. On Sunday, Weston McKennie and Tim Weah both started for Juventus during their dramatic 2-1 win over Salernitana in the Serie A. McKennie played the full 90 minutes, and Tim Weah was subbed out around the 82nd minute, and he seemed like he sorta gassed out. First and foremost, I'm gonna oversimplify Weston McKennie's performance by saying he was as reliable as always. He has been playing well for Juventus all season long. He has essentially been Mr. Reliable for them the entire season so far. There was a goal-scoring opportunity that he probably should have scored, but outside of that, he was very good. He's a very dynamic player, and he's been fantastic for them this season. Tim Weah was also fine down the right side of the field, playing as a wingback, and he also got robbed of his assist. You see, he whipped in a low cross where Vlahovic pretty much missed the ball. Like, he didn't strike the ball. He tried to hit it, but he didn't. He tried to hit it and he barely touched it. Then Samuel Ling Jr. scored off that low cross with a tiny little deflection from Vlahovic off missing the ball. He literally was not able to hit the ball. That's not a flick to assist your teammate. That's not a deflection that was like conscious. He like missed it. The assist should have gone to Tim Weah, but instead they counted it as an assist to Vlahovic for whatever reason. And I'll say this again, that was not a flick. And FootMob gave Vlahovic the assist. I'm sorry, but I'm declaring war on FootMob for this one. The same way Han Solo shot first, Weah got the assist for this one. And that's all for the Americans in Italy. Now, before we continue, drop a like, and there's a quick word from our sponsor, Underdog, so I'll be back in 1 minute. And their link is on the description. It's not Underdog, it's Underdog Fantasy. And thank you, Underdog Fantasy, for sponsoring Tactical Manager TV. Underdog Fantasy is a fun game to play prior to any soccer match, or basketball, or football as well, but we don't talk about those two in Tactical Manager TV. Sometimes basketball during live watch-alongs. I have been playing Underdog Fantasy for over a year now. You can download the app by using the link on the description of this video, and you can also use the promo code TMTV. And Underdog will be matching your first deposit for up to $100. And in the process, you'll be helping the channel avoid bankruptcy. The game I mainly play is called Pick'em. You just click on it, scroll to the soccer section, and pick a player for a specific match and select the stats that you believe will be lower or higher. It's very easy to play, but be smart about your picks because it's not easy to win. I'll be playing some Underdog Fantasy during some match live streams or match live watch-alongs, so stay tuned for that, as I will be forced to cheer for a player or root against him. Now, I am a professional hater, so I'll probably be rooting for the player's downfall. Once again, don't forget to use the promo code TMTV and use the link on the description of this video. Thank you, Underdog Fantasy, for sponsoring the channel. Now that we're back, we're going to talk about the Americans in Germany, but unfortunately, there were no DFB Pokal games or Bundesliga matches, but there's two Americans that I want to talk about, and they are Gio Reyna and Brendan Aronson. Let's start with Gio Reyna, because on Saturday, Gio started for Borussia Dortmund during their friendly against AZ Alkmaar. And what does this mean? It actually means nothing. It does not mean he's staying this January transfer window. It does not mean he's leaving. And it does not mean Terzic will start him more often when there's actual competitive matches. As the great Allen Iverson once said, we're talking about practice. And this, my friends, was just practice. I do also want to add that Borussia Dortmund just brought back Jadon Sancho. And at first, I thought that wouldn't really affect Gio Reyna because Jadon mostly plays out wide. But there have been reports saying that he will be tested central as well. So it'll probably affect Gio Reyna's minutes one way or another. Based on some reports this week, it does seem like Gio Reyna might actually not leave this winter. He'll either be sold during the summer or end up renewing his contract. Time will tell, but I just really hope he leaves Dortmund. Now let's quickly go through Brenden Aaronson. On Saturday, Brenden Aaronson started and scored for Union Berlin in a friendly match. So again, practice. It seemed like they were playing him more as a second striker or a shadow striker in this specific match. His goal was actually pretty nice also. He was able to settle the ball down with his chest and get a good touch and a clinical finish to close off the play, scoring. It's just a friendly, but Brenden Aaronson is a player that most certainly needs all the confidence boost that he can get, so we'll take it. Now, there were other friendlies from other German teams with Americans playing for them, but it's not really worth diving into this video. The Bundesliga will be back next week, so we'll be back to reporting on the Americans that play in Germany on the next US Men's National Team Abroad next Monday, because we always do it on Monday. Next stop, Spain. And we'll start with Luca de la Torre from Celta de Vigo. On Sunday, de la Torre started and played 78 minutes for Celta de Vigo during their 4-2 win over Amorebieta in the Copa del Rey, which is the Spanish Cup. Next up, we have Johnny Cardoso from Real Betis. On Saturday, Johnny was not available for Real Betis because he was not yet registered due to some documents being delayed. He will be registered this week, probably on Monday or Tuesday, and he's expected to make his debut for Real Betis this upcoming weekend in La Liga. So stay tuned for that. And that's it for Spain. So now let's go to France and talk about Florentin Balogun that plays for Monaco. On Sunday, Balogun started and played 69 minutes. Nice. For Monaco during their 2-2 draw with Lens in the French Cup round of 64. Monaco ended up advancing on penalty shootouts. I wasn't able to watch this match, but based off FootMob that I declared war to earlier in the video, he had a poor performance. Then again, always take FootMob ratings with a grain of salt, or even more than a grain of salt. Take it with like a huge bag of salt, because they're good and they're worth looking at, but they're not always accurate with what you see in the actual field, the actual performance of the player. I will give you one stat that was a bit alarming. It was a bad stat. Balogun lost all 6 of his ground duels and all 4 of his aerial duels. Like, he had 10 50-50 balls, 4 in the air, 6 in the ground. He lost all 10 of them. I know that's not something to be concerned over the long term, but that's probably part of the reason why his rating was so low. If you watched the game, let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Did Balogun play well, or was he actually poor? And let's be honest, Balogun has been in poor form for some time. I would say like 2 months. I'm not concerned over the long term, but it's a fact. He hasn't been playing well. Pretty sure he didn't play well in November, December, and the trend is still going on in January. It'll change soon. I promise. Next up, we would have had the Americans that play in the Eredivisie in the Netherlands, but they're only back on the 13th, which is next weekend. So there's not much to talk about there besides one American abroad that has left the series. So a moment of silence for Jordi Mihailovic that has left AZ Alkmaar, and he went back to Major League Soccer to play for the Colorado Rapids. And he comes back to MLS with a DP contract, of course, partially because of the transfer fee and obviously because of his salary as well. So he flopped in the Netherlands, and he's a DP in MLS. You can draw your own conclusions from that. Now let's go back to England and talk about the Americans that play in the second division of England in the EFL Championship. However, this weekend they actually played in the FA Cup. The first one being Sargent from Norwich. On Saturday, Sargent started and played 45 minutes for Norwich during their 1-1 draw with the Bristol Rovers in the FA Cup. Sargent looked great for Norwich in his first start since he returned from injury. He was great off the ball, combination play, looked dangerous, and seemed to be a level above most players on the field. He almost scored, almost got an assist. The only context to be added here is that they were facing a third division side, a mid-table third division side in the FA Cup. So the opponent he was facing wasn't that great. But he was coming back from injury, so there's, all of that context that you can digest and draw your own conclusions. I'm not here to tell you how to judge it. I'm just giving you the information. But as I said before, take this with a grain of salt, the performance. He was good, but the opponent matters. Regardless, I have very high expectations for Sargent for what's left of this season. I firmly believe he would have scored 20 plus goals in the championship if he didn't get injured. With that said, let's go to another American, and his name is Haji Wright, and he plays for Coventry. On Saturday, Haji Wright was not available due to a muscle discomfort. He has been on a hot streak for Coventry, and he should be good to go for their next match. They just rested him because it was the FA Cup. By the way, it seems like most of his success is coming from him playing on the winger position instead of a center forward. And since we have a winger depth problem, he might be partially one way to solve it. I mean, there's a massive drop-off when we don't have Pulisic or Weah, and we'll continue to have it without Pulisic or Weah, but maybe Haji is a more useful winger than, let's say, an out-of-form Brendan Aronson. Last but not least, in England, we have a guy that has finally returned from injury, and his name is Dike, and he plays for West Brom. On Sunday, Dike was back after being out for 9 months due to a torn Achilles. He did start and was subbed out at halftime for West Brom during their 4-1 win over Aldershot Town in the FA Cup. He was coming back from an injury, and they had a 3-0 lead at halftime, so there was no point on keeping him on the field. Dike did look a bit rusty, which is totally understandable and totally fine. I mean, the guy hasn't played for 9 months, but he still managed to score for West Brom with a powerful close-range half-volley kick. Welcome back, Dike, the former Orlando City center forward. Now, all the other Americans that play in Mexico, the Italian second division, Scotland, like Cameron Carter-Vickers, they didn't really have a game this weekend, so there's nothing to report this week. Next week, some of them will be back and we'll talk about it. I do want to add that Brendan Vasquez has left FC Cincinnati and he's now an American abroad. So Brendan Vasquez will be added to the series as he joins the Liga MX side, Monterrey. I'm not a fan of this move, but it is what it is, and Brendan Vasquez has joined the U.S. Men's National Team Abroad series. All right, everyone, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the first U.S. Men's National Team Abroad episode of 2024. Drop a like before you go, and as always, a comment for the YouTube algorithm. We have more videos coming out this week, obviously, so we're back to our regular schedule after we took a little bit of a break at New Year's. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.